So we get asked from time to time, why would I want a handheld over a wrist strap release? You know, what's the benefits, pros and cons? They both are different beasts and they have their own advantages. I mean, a wrist strap release is, it's always there. It's fast and easy. It's stuck to your arm. Whereas a handheld, there's always a chance that you could lose it or drop it or lose track of where you put it. So there's advantages for different scenarios, but you'll notice for some reason it seems like competition shooters tend to usually use a handheld release versus majority of your hunters using a wrist strap release. And why is that? Well, the reality is a wrist strap release is typically easier for someone who's new to archery to learn with. It's not as complicated. There's no chance of them accidentally letting go and shooting the release through the bow or having a huge mishap. And so typically you'll see them go with this, but the real reason why you'll see your competition shooters using a handheld is there's kind of a, I don't know, most people don't talk about it. Those that know, and those that don't know don't ever really ask because they don't know any better. And that is that there is an accuracy issue that's happening here. A wrist strap release is typically going to seem as if it's a more accurate type of release than a wrist strap release. But it actually comes down to, you could be just as accurate with this, but there's a lot more things you got to pay attention to. So what you're going to notice when you're using a wrist strap release is that depending on where your finger is at on this trigger, whether you're on the outside, inside, whether you're cupped around or out on the tip of your finger like so, and how fast you pull through is going to change your point of impact. Also, depending on where this trigger is related to where you're actually hooking to your D-loop will also affect that. So what happens is when you go and squeeze, if you're doing a light squeeze, you're slightly tipping the head of your release to the side. And it's even more amplified if you had like a tether strap between your headpiece, something that's floating, then depending on how you're triggering this is going to pull it to the side, which these thousandths of an inch back at the shooter, it relates into inches downrange on the target. So I've seen before where a guy, I was shooting in a 3D tournament one time, and this guy is shooting lights out the first day, and he's just squeezing his trigger every single shot. Great executions, good surprise controlled shot execution. But then the next day, all of a sudden he's left and right and left and right. And what he's doing is he's full finger up, punching it every single time. Well, the difference is he's going to hit differently left and right from one day to the next, because in one day he's squeezing the trigger and the next day he's punching it. Versus a handheld like this, when you're up in your position here, whether I punch it or I squeeze that trigger, I'm not changing the head at all. It's locked in position. So depending on what you like, it always comes into play too, but the reality is that you can be sloppier with a handheld release and not get punished as badly as with a wrist strap release.